The Emir of Kano and governors of the opposition People's Democratic Party say they're worried over Nigeria's worsening economy and the rise in living costs. The PDP governors even warned that Nigeria could become like Venezuela. Let's bring in a rise analyst, Dr. Sam Amadi. Good to see you. And we also had Bayon Onuga earlier with Somna also speaking about that. Now, let's talk about what's happening in the country. It's no longer news. Everyone is talking. For the first time, once upon a time used to be the low class. There's no more middle class, the everyday Nigerian. Now, even the Emir of Kano has added his voice, looking the First Lady in the eye. Tell your husband things are tough.
Yep.
I think we never had it this way. I mean, in terms, not just in terms of the biting hardship, but it's also in terms of the public outcry. One could be tempted to say, well, things were also bad under Buhari. I mean, why didn't these guys speak up? So it could be that Buhari had some kind of, status or whatever. But like Emma said, it got worse. It didn't start now, it got worse. So the key point, first point is that probably we're getting to a point where the Nigerian elites are waking up to the fact it started building up. It was a gradual slope, and we have gotten to the maybe close to bottom of this pit that we've gotten more significantly since 2015, when economic policy, in my view, diverted away and diverged from, taking the people as a metric. Under Buhari's 8 years, there was a sense in which one expected Buhari was going to be Talakawa. I mean, he comes from the people, and therefore public policy could respond to the concerns of the ordinary people.
That's pro Talakawa.
But he was elitist. And that was surprising. It's a major study for political economists to say, why should somebody who is a champion, who came to power as the leader of the downtrodden, engage in policies that are actually elitist? If you look at budgets, public finance going to critical drivers of development, we didn't have that. Today, that's not compounded. Now, Tinubu's campaign manifesto, if you read it very well, seems to something like what we call in economic development a social market, where the idea is to govern the market, use it to address social benefits. But I think since he took over power, the elitism got more, and the whole idea, think around removing subsidy. I mean, Bayo said there was a consensus. Yes, there was a consensus that subsidy was inefficient, but the structure of the removal
and the timing.
And what he put in place. I was part of some of the conversation with the Labour Party and meeting the Chief of Staff. What I saw really, and I told the Labour President, was that government had no plan. Government had no plan. Up to now, the CNG, they had no plan on mitigation. Everything the Tinubu rolled out are what we call industrial policy. They're policies about growing the economy, not policies about dealing with the outcome of the first. Take, for example, say you're going to look for industrial champions, give them grant. That's not going to, in the short to medium term, that will not result in mitigating the fact that the woman is going to pay more for transport, electricity, pay more for fuel, everything. It cascades down to everything. So the point here is three things. I think first is, are we seeing enough commitment to address this problem? Forget the technical solutions. They may be struggling to find it. But the empathy. So when you're talking about 500 million for a committee to review minimum wage, it speaks to the disconnection. It speaks to executive lack of sympathy and engagement. Because first, we want to see leaders really put a skin in the game. That means they themselves say, you know what, things are hard. We want to feel it like you do. So we shun 160 million vehicle doesn't speak like that. 500 million to inaugurate a committee is total reckless irresponsibility. So I think that the message of the Kano governor is very clear. It seems so far things are difficult and governments are responding well.
What should be the approach now? Does this economic team really, fundamentally, do they know what to do to get Nigeria out of this rot at this time? And what really should be the approach? Should it be short-term, medium, or long-term?
First is that they probably, in spite of their pedigree, whether they are great guys or not, what they do so far shows they didn't even understand. There was no diagnosis. They didn't prepare to deal with this crisis. They are kind of experimenting. Okay, fine, defend the dollar, don't defend it. It's a matter of supply side. It's also about consumption, stop send their children to school. I mean,
and stop
those kind of
going
blind
for medical
treatment.
Yeah.
That's not. You don't respond to economic crisis by appealing to the people, their behavior. You change their behavior through policy. So they don't have that, seem to be struggling. Two is that the first thing is the government, the level of intensity of the presidency engaging the governors, everybody. We've not seen that energy, the energy that says, look, let's come to the table. National Assembly level. It's possible that the nation can have a consensus to ride the storm and say, you know what, we can see the benefit of this process, we can see the difficulties, but this is how we can collectively ride it. But that's leadership. It's missing. There's no leadership. So that leadership will put labor, workers, governors, everybody together to look for solutions. And I think that's where the president started wrongly. The cabinet and everybody there, for example, Secretary of Government, I mean, with all due respect, doesn't have the communicative capability to really put government together. Because when you're going through a crisis, it's about communication. The commission doesn't mean propaganda. It's not about Twitter. It's about...
You need an economic war room, kind of.
First, technical. Two, non-technical. I mean, human beings have to have trust. They have to believe. This idea that you're going to get financial experts, finance is 10% of economy. In fact, what they're focusing is on, finance. Focus on real economy, production. Focus on political economy, how people value things and what they are seeing connection. Focus on how people also adaptation. And so in the short term, you may need to look at what Biden did in the US. There's a crisis going on. They're not talking about looking for those who are on that kind of undervalued, maybe you sell 20 kilos, and what you're selling is 10 kilos. A whole American government is policing the market.
Those that are being
seeking out those who are shortchanging consumer. That is response to short term. You don't talk about IMF and World Bank remove subsidy.
Absolutely. You know, Dr. Amadi, I think, speaking of, because recently now listen to you, policies, actions, statements from appointees come into play here, because recently some Nigerians are wondering, for instance, you want to renew your passport, renewal, and you still asked to go back to your local government to get local government letter for renewal. So these are things that people are saying, wait a minute, we're already hard done by things, and we're spending little 2 kobo, 1 kobo that we're getting because of all these policies. Is it that some of these appointees, in this case, the interior minister, are detached from realities of knowing that you have a data bank that can help the people? Because at the end of the day, it'll culminate into the hardship people are talking about. Ease is not in sight.
Absolutely. The point is, look, too much show, and less traction. For example, I flew in on Sunday, and the interior minister came in, and you see how the protocol stopped everyone from movement. I mean, this sense of ceremonial governance, this sense of, being in charge, KBSC, maybe, they're still carried on. We've not seen, the citizens themselves have not seen that the government itself can pull through this. You see, trust and hope is critical ingredients for driving people to a new level. People see, government is really going to pull through, and then they invest hope. This is a time that the citizens need to believe in the government. But they don't believe in government by telling them you have to be patriotic. First, they want to see a government that believes in them and that is working for them. And then they can see government communicate and tell them, and they begin to see evidence. So first, since these 2-3 weeks of acute hardship, tell me one policy that has responded in the short term.
Open up the grain reserves,
so
for example.
How many people have even doubted whether we have enough? If it
in the
several times we've been using grain reserves. How much has that impacted on price of things in the market?
Great point. Bayo Ononuga on prime time moments ago actually said, look, a lot of the price increases really are, largely artificial. Hoarding and what have you. To some extent, he's right. But is it an indictment on the government that's not able to rein in those who, want to undermine the economy?
See, government is regulation. Regulation is changing behavior, cracking people. So if there are people who are hoarding, they're going to hoard. Just like people say, they're hoarding foreign exchange. Your job is to use policy, nudging, and coercion sometimes. And that's why the state has the monopoly of violence. You have to solve the problem. Sometimes it crack people, you nudge them, you persuade them, you give them sweeteners, incentivize them. state power is not a power to aggrandize yourself. It's a power to change behavior, track people, arrange things. So the question is, first, what's the vision of the presidency? And I said they abandoned their document, no matter how imperfect it is. Their idea in their manifesto speaks to a different kind of governance. Right. The team they put together is not a team that can even drive their, no matter how imperfect, it was a better document that they are governing far below their manifesto.
So who helps the government, in this case the president, oversee his appointees to the extent that they do even go beyond
what the document says.
What the JD is about.
We borrowed the model of chief of staff in the US.
Absolutely.
That is the manager of policy. We now staff it with politicians who are looking for next election. That's the engine room, and in my view, that room is not working and probably doesn't have the capacity to drive the kind of change we need.
Well, it's a good place. It's a good place to leave it, even though it leaves a sour taste in the mouth. It's a fine place. I'd like to thank you for your time, Dr. Sam Amadi.
Thank you.
Into the 2024-2025 session.